G'day guys, Mike with the Outer Circle, and this is another episode of What Broke the Fans. In this case, it's Warhammer fans are what broke the fans. Let's make something clear before I start. I've said something many times on this channel, and that is that it's okay to enjoy the hobby your preferred way. Now, I have to make a disclaimer like this because so many precious idiots cannot divorce an opinion piece by a YouTuber about a company from a personal attack on them and everything they stand for as a human. This video isn't about the people who don't like my content. It's not about the people who rightly pick up on mistakes I make. This video is about the most inane, mind-boggling and pathetic thing I see online. It's about the people who make excuses for and accept their poor treatment as customers and who enable it to such a degree that they want other people to be dragged down into the tar pits with them. There will be some harsh language in this video, but don't worry, I'm Australian and swearing for us is used for emphasis, not out of anger. But do be warned, if you don't like it, turn away now. In all my time creating content, there has been one constant, and no matter how good or bad the message of my videos, that constant was the comments from the fans. There are constructive comments and there are negative comments, but what strikes me, however, is the rampant fanboyism within the Warhammer community as a whole. A passionate and defensive doctrine amongst some in this community which goes above and beyond any other franchise I know of. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was the video I did on the Chaos Space Marine / Eldar Christmas box. Apart from some very mild remarks about things which didn't thrill me as a design aesthetic in general, the video was entirely positive. But that wasn't good enough. People still found ways to complain that I complain too much. So today, I want to take a moment to complain about the people who complain about my complaining. It's complainception. For years, I've put up with it, and I just accepted that. And since this is the internet, people will say and do what they wish. I made my peace with it. But I want to make this video and take it as an opportunity to explain the situation as I see it, and that's what you're getting today. I've showcased comments before from reviews, from community pages, but the one that really stood out to me was one on the Siege of Terra novel series. The person said, and I quote, "After so many novels, the actuality is difficult to stand up to in the reality of writing the books. Our expectations are impossible to fulfill, so I say enjoy it, and we are lucky to receive it." I can't help but wonder if people like the person who wrote that are aware of just how jaded they've become, holding that high standard of artificial positivity highly and proudly for all to see. These people claim to love anything and everything Warhammer. Don't think about it, just love it, no matter what. To hold any objective standard against the hobby is to be negative in the extreme, and it's the equivalent of being filled with hate. It's extreme and it's manipulative, and it's the standard I feel like I was held up to until the point where I first made this channel. I think we've all been there, airing a rightful grievance in some forum, only to be shut down and the thread locked by some admin because the thread isn't helpful or some such toxic attitude. It's very easy to portray me, my opinions and this channel as a whole as negative, in light of the fact that we do hold the proverbial torch to Games Workshop's feet constantly. And I get it, we are far more critical than glowing with our praise. And I've long maintained that there are many other channels which exist to heap praise. This channel is the counter to that. But when I did take the time to make a glowing video praising Games Workshop for some correct steps, it still wasn't good enough for a small and yet vocal segment of the community. So what does the community do which really frustrates me? Well, for a start, there's a large group of people who take exception to those of us who point out the minutiae or details within the stories, which are hard contradictions of known facts. And yet those self-same individuals will cite obscure or rare snippets of lore to back their own terrible positions. You can't have it both ways. They claim things like canon is overrated and this is canon, by the way, in the continuity of the setting. They'll point to things like Rogue Trader to justify how the setting has changed, despite 40k maintaining a more or less consistent background in its universe from 1993 up until 2017, with few deviations within. That's not an ever-changing universe. That's a universe that had a continuity for 80% of its existence, and saying otherwise is disingenuous at best. If the universe is ever-changing, does any continuity matter? If it has no set outcomes, how can there be stakes within it? The setting loses its intrinsic value if there is something that isn't solid to hold on to within it. There are fans of this hobby that do not accept this. They do not care about the many shortfalls or continuity errors that occur within the setting, and they will accept any and all background no matter how questionable. I know this because they've said as much in my video comments. They've said it to my face. They insist that they like it anyway, despite all these flaws, and when I probe them for why they feel this way, they have some vague answers about coolness of the universe or the characters. This confuses me, because the very behaviour they're enabling is undermining the very foundation of that thing they profess to care about. When I confront them with the actual problems I perceive, they often concede that I'm technically correct in most circumstances, but that I'm either blowing it up way bigger than an issue, or that they are fine with it regardless. And you know what? That's fine. I'm totally 100% okay with it, so long as that is where the debate ends, with a die-hard set of fanboys saying they love any and all Warhammer content. Unfortunately, despite the fact that those fans openly admit how easy they are to please, they've made strenuous efforts to silence any and all criticism of Games Workshop, no matter how valid. There's a further irony in here about how the behaviours of those of us who seek to maintain the hobby are labelled as toxic. These same people will seize politically motivated statements from Games Workshop, such as how they don't support fascism and how their universe has no good guys, despite, clearly marketing the Space Marines as good guys in basically all the promotional material, but how Games Workshop says Warhammer is for everyone. They take these statements and they use them as a blank slate to graft their grievances onto. What's that? You held someone to account for something they did or said? Well, that's gatekeeping, you're out. Warhammer is for everyone. What's this? You think people should paint their stuff in your personal gaming group, which doesn't have any bearing on people across the globe because it's personal opinion and not an enforceable action? Nah, that's gatekeeping, you're out. What's that? You play a game set in a historical setting of the universe such as Horus Heresy, and you want to see people also create their forces to suit that setting, much as how people who play Napoleonics don't want to see Panzer divisions at Waterloo? Well, my friend, that's elitism, you're out. What's that? You spoke to the wrong kind of person, and we don't like their political opinion. That's it, you're out. And this is a special kind of toxic, where in order to enforce a hobby being for everyone, you must exclude wide swaths of the community because they have wrongthink, perceived or otherwise. Here's a thought for you. Play who you want to play, don't play who you don't want to play. If you disagree with someone over something, don't try and cancel them, because if it were me being cancelled, I sure as hell wouldn't rethink my actions. I'd likely dig my heels in, and no lesson will be taught. On that note, for the moral busybodies out there, who the fuck gave you moral agency to call the shots on who you think is or isn't deserving to participate in the community? You think you're in the right because you think your moral stance imbues you with some sort of divine power. Fuck off with that attitude. Moving on. I've heard every kind of defense on behalf of the company. From sayings like, high prices are due to taxes and shipping, or, they are giving you something, how do you get off not praising it? But do you know what I never hear? Who I never hear a defensive whisper from? I never hear from Games Workshop themselves. Now, why would they stoop down to the level of a peasant and make any statement really? They don't have to, since there are so many white knights out there set to defend the dragon from the princess in this case. One of my favourite comments is the straw man. You know the kind of argument where they take something, change the context and present it in a different way. I get them all the time, and a good example might be how people who defended The Last Jedi were treated. People would say, first, they complain about The Force Awakens being too similar to Star Wars. Now they say The Last Jedi is too different. Clearly these trolls cannot be pleased. Well, they know damn well that that isn't the argument being made, but they present it that way. Well, I have a similar thing on this channel. Yeah, I piss and moan about how the heresy is treated by Games Workshop. And people point out and say, it's hypocritical of me to complain that there are too few models and now there are too many. Macca is just always salty. Just like with The Last Jedi, they took a legitimate argument I made, reworked the argument to suit their worldview. In order to explain the true argument, I then have to go and type it out directly in response to this kind of criticism in the comments. So the real argument isn't that they released too few models and now there are too many. The argument is that A, they spent too long a time producing no content, and that's okay if they'd also produced a roadmap, but they haven't released that either, leaving us in limbo. And B, they choose to release models, but they're focusing on the wrong factions, as you need to provide fundamentals to every faction and then you specialise with more and more stuff for other legions. They haven't done that. Also, the classic line I see trotted out constantly for Heresy is the old, "Just wait a bit, you'll get your legions too." Guys, it's been 9 years since the system released. How long do you expect people to reasonably wait? I'm not being pedantic, there is a clear line of reasoning here, and I don't need people to like it, just acknowledge the problem exists, and instead of simping for it, try and fix it. Would you call 9 years a reasonable time frame? In fact, what would you call a reasonable time frame to fix the issue? What legions would you think need the most targeting? I imagine that converting a Salamander's character is probably a lot harder than converting an Imperial Fist, but I could be wrong. After all, dragon scales might be much easier to sculpt than just picking vanilla bits out of the bits box and slapping a fish-shaped decal on, but I digress. For Games Workshop as a whole, I simply want 2 things. 2. The first is to respect the artistic integrity, story, and continuity that came before. Don't try and corporatize the game and sacrifice the integrity of the universe in order to appease the shareholders in the short term. Second, make the hobby sustainable. This is price, this is availability, and it's the way you craft your rules. For years, they've sacrificed sustainability for profits, and their short-term gains are leading to some serious long-term consequences, where the community is slowly aging out as youth cannot afford to buy in. As a child in the 90s, I could afford this hobby. As an adult today, I don't see kids returning time and time again to make new purchases. They have been effectively priced out, and it's simply the adults who are willing to take the knock on the chin who sustain the company. Circumstantial evidence? Sure, but this is a classic argument used by those who would defend the company. I cannot prove the kids are not entering the hobby, therefore everything is fine. Well, today, I'd like to put the shoe officially on the other foot. Prove me that the opposite is true. Prove that children are indeed entering the hobby and staying. Prove that I'm wrong and do it with some real evidence. And if you cannot, I think we should just accept my theory. And if you don't like it, then fuck off. The fact that people need to compare this hobby to things like professional golf or motorsports in order to justify the expense of it really tells you all you need to know about if children can afford it. Those of us who defend the health of the hobby simply cannot abide by this state of affairs. Those who freely admit that the quality of the product doesn't matter to them cannot let it go. The irony here is that those who tell channels like this one to shut up are very vocal about how much doesn't matter to them. Look at that Siege of Terror quote at the start. They know there are problems, but are willing to overlook them. If you can overlook them, then why can't you overlook me? Why do you have to shit on me? Hell, who cares about me? I'm a big boy. I can take it. Let me cite an example of a person who wasn't ready for the positivity police of Warhammer. I saw a guy on an Aeronautica page timidly and super politely ask about pre-orders. This guy clearly wasn't angry with the company, he was just a bit exasperated and confused. Because he'd pre-ordered an Aeronautica Thunderhawk, and after 6 weeks he still didn't even have a shipping confirmation. When he went to his local Games Workshop, they had the product there, sitting multiple boxes on the shelf, and he said, "Hey, can I get this as my pre-order?" And they said, "No, they can't fulfill your pre-order." So he tries to cancel his pre-order, figures he'll just go in and buy one off the shelf. No, they won't do that either. They won't cancel his pre-order. So he came onto this Aeronautica page to ask people what he should do. Now, who here thinks that the responses were fair and reasonable? Yeah, not fucking likely on a specialist games page. People said things like, and I quote, "They don't have an obligation to deliver it to you first. Why should you be able to cancel the order at any time?" And my favourite, Games Workshop is under a lot of pressure. How about you take it easy on the staff? They're working hard. Is this not some of the most toxic shit you've ever seen? A man with a legitimate gripe getting ass blasted by his supposedly supportive community just because he dared to question why he pre-ordered it all when Games Workshop instead insisted on filling their stockists first. I'll give you another example of people defending the company for no good reason. I'm in a Titanicus group, and they have a blanket ban on anything which is not the current plastic Titanicus units and terrain. 3D printed a Rhino or even used an old school epic one on the base of your Titan? Nope, banned. 3D printed your own clearly different weapon, which is perfectly legal for your Titan, instead of buying one from Games Workshop? Nope, banned. Wow, what a supportive fucking community page right there. I bet that's really helping to grow the hobby. Maybe Games Workshop will give the admin some free stuff for all their hard simping work. Prices, they're a favourite of mine. Fun fact, I actually run a plastic injection moulding factory. I know what machines cost, I know what labour costs, I know what materials cost, transport fees, insurance, dyes, drafting, research, development, etc. I can't know the specifics for Games Workshop, but I have in the past made some pretty educated guesses at roughly what things cost. Now, do you think people say, this guy's basically as close as you can get to an expert on this industry, considering he participates in it at a high level? Should we give him the benefit of the doubt? Or do you think they come in and nitpick the comment section? Well, Macca, you didn't mention the cafeteria staff member and their annual wage, so basically all your figures are wrong. You have no idea and should cover yourself in raw meat and jump in a river full of crocodiles. Yeah, this is the exact type of toxic shit I'm talking about. Although the crocodiles thing didn't happen. As a side note, to coin a line from another YouTuber, if you're a content creator and you've, without irony, recommended that people ignore the flaws and just accept this status quo, you should be fucking ashamed. To continue paraphrasing, for those who seek to endlessly defend, to justify, and circle the problems you have with the hobby rather than confronting them, if you're so content with the state of affairs, why do you feel the need to come to me and attack me for asking for better? You've pretty much outed yourself as a person who believes that disliking anything Warhammer is hate. You've already said that you'll take anything Games Workshop makes. You're up for whatever, so why on earth do you turn your guns on other fans who are asking for a better franchise? Games Workshop, they either listen to their fans and make some changes, or they disregard us and don't. Either way though, you'll get more Warhammer, so why are you inserting yourself in this discussion at all? When your latitude for what is acceptable is so wide and undefined, you've effectively disqualified yourself from being a part of this conversation. Telling others not to think too much, telling them that any questioning is the equivalent of hate, that only earns you a place at the kids' table. I swear that I could sell you a product which does not work, slap a Warhammer tag on it, and you'd not only be fine with it, you'd actively find ways to defend your purchase, even though we both know it doesn't work. Your message has been loud and clear. You don't want us to criticize the hobby. But if your first preference is to silence a product improvement discussion from happening, yes, you are the problem. Just walk away from the debate, because remember, you'll accept whatever. From the dawn of retail, products have only gotten better due to pushback. But the way certain members of this community have presented their arguments, it's almost as if Games Workshop are a charity, and we should be happy with anything they give us, as they hate money and are under no obligation to provide us with anything. Yes, they have shareholders. Yes, they need to please them. In fact, they have an obligation to generate wealth for them. But they also have an obligation to sustain and grow that wealth, which is where I think they're falling down. They'd rather sell you a $60 Primaris Lieutenant today than sell you one a week at $30 for 4 weeks. They're that fixated on short-term profits. They're trainers. That's, for those who don't know, the people who kind of manage the store managers in the background, who tell them how to run things. They actively despise things like events and staff taking time out of their day to build a community, rather than reading everyone the riot act on entry to the store, shoving a model in one hand and ripping a credit card out with the other. Stop supporting this behaviour. Stop making excuses for it. Step the fuck back and let us adults in the room have our say. If all of you watching commented, "Where's a Raven Guard Praetor?" every time Warhammer Community previewed yet another unit for another legion that's so full it doesn't need it, instead of simping out comments like, wow, this is great, I'm buying 3 of these, maybe we'd actually have a fucking Raven Guard Praetor by now, instead of half a dozen Imperial Fist ones. Or maybe we wouldn't, but either way, you'd get something. So complaining really doesn't affect you, because even if they don't change the release schedule, you'll still get something you want, because you want it all. You have 0 willpower, no self-control, and when you see it, you like it, and you'll have it. You'll tell me to shut up and like it. You may not have noticed this, hypothetical Warhammer apologist, but you've gotten everything you've wanted. When you fight with people like me, you're fighting with fellow fans who just want Warhammer to be the best it can be. You can simply move along, just go home and enjoy your World of Warhammer craft. There's nothing stopping you. You have nothing to be bitter about, but you insist on arguing, because I can only assume you have a desire to control our opinions and feelings. Which is really sad, because I'm sitting here trying to improve the hobby, not just by calling out the company, but by promoting how to access aspects of the hobby, by showcasing private individuals' army projects, explaining my projects and the genesis behind them, demonstrating how to play, providing tutorials, hosting events. But you'd think I do none of that with how many comments I receive daily about how I'm never happy with anything Games Workshop does, how if I hate the hobby so much I should quit, and how you used to enjoy the old content where I did getting started videos, but now all I do is hate on Games Workshop every video, which demonstrates you don't keep track of the content whatsoever. Congratulations! Like I said before, you've got all you want out of the hobby, so sit back and don't take part in these discussions, which you say cause so much angst and pain. You've acknowledged there are issues, but you're okay with them, so sit back and relax, because you'll take whatever. I know I've pissed off a lot of people with this video, probably some money will be lost, some patrons, that's fine. If you're sitting back right now though, identifying with the subject and feeling aghast and betrayed because I don't agree with your opinion, maybe, just maybe, you recognise there's a problem here. So rather than shaming me or attacking, how about you come in and deliver an articulate counter-response to me? I always have and always will welcome that, but please don't be the guy who writes, I got barely 2 minutes in, this guy is so wrong it hurts, I stopped the video. Because that comment has popped up way too many times and is super depressing how poor some adults are at digesting content and providing a measured response. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I sincerely hope I never ever have to make one like it again. Mac with the Outer Circle, see you all on the next one.